Okay, the point of this video is to show you that before you reach for salt, table salt that is, there's all sorts of ingredients you can cook with that add more flavor that's not salt. So we're gonna walk through the grocery store and I'm gonna show you how using products that are naturally salty is a great way to layer flavor and develop complexity in your cooking. So to start, I wanted to show you in this aisle we have soy sauce, right? You can use that to add salt. You can use shoyu or tamari as well, gluten-free soy sauce. Okay, in this section you can also use something as easy as coconut aminos, right? Soy-free. This is going to add salt instead of adding table salt. Let's see if they have all the way at the bottom here. You can see fish sauce.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
Yep.
That's another way to add seasoning. That's obviously something you do. Why Thai food tastes so good is you have things like fish sauce and lime instead of using table sauce because you get that big umami from fish sauce. So that was Red Boat. I recommend using that. So another no-brainer way to add salt is using cheese, right? So something like a seaside cheddar, a sharp cheddar would be good, or using pecorinos, Romano works really well. Obviously Parmesan, something like that. But don't overthink just a good aged sheep's milk cheese, right? You can grate it over pasta. You can also just really put it over top of like any dish to add a little bit of sharpness to it. Another good way to do that would be to come over and look at like fetas. You know, you think about crumbling feta into a salad as opposed to adding table salt or adding something seasoning with different salts. You know, something like a feta, you're gonna add a little texture, you're gonna add grassiness. You know, paneer is another one, like Indian, that's quite salty. It's an Indian style cheese. You sear that off like a halloumi and you serve it with a little bit of greens. Another really underrated way to add salt would be to add any traditional tinned fish, right? So you can even add something like, this is Ontario trout with dill, right? You lay that over a salad. Or you know, adding into a pasta, you can add chopped clams, something as simple as that. But even just a little bit of, like if you're doing a pasta sauce, right? A bit of chopped up wild sardines in the bottom of your tomato sauce is gonna add like a big umami saltiness that adds a lot of flavor. And then of course anchovies are gonna be a good option as well. But I wouldn't overthink like more crazy stuff. Like here's smoked mussels. You know, you could chop those up and fold them into a pasta sauce, right? You can grill off a nice piece of bread and cover it with smashed fava beans and layer on some mussels and you start layering on flavor, right? Here's some roasted garlic mackerel. So that's something where you can add a little chunks of that to something like a Caesar salad and it takes it to the next level by adding a little bit of salt. I also want to show you this one. This is called the white anchovy, but it's actually called boqueron, which is from Spain. These are brilliant. They're kind of like anchovies, but they're a little bit less salty and aggressive, so you can lay these over salad is a great way to use them. You can imagine also if you were to do something like make a simple potato salad and lay these over, it's going to add big saltiness, again another layer of flavor. The idea here is that when you use table salt, you're kind of just adding sodium or you're adding a saltiness, but you're not adding other layers or you're not building layers of flavor. So when you start looking at some of these ingredients like salted fish or like using soy sauce, you're adding more dimension to your cooking. So here we are actually in the salt section, and if you're going to use salt, a nice thing to do is actually invest in like a nice finishing salt. So something like Maldon is delicious, and if you can add an element like smoke or a flavoring, chili salt, kaffir lime salt, it's going to add, like I said, another dimension. You can also do salt alternatives like Maine or Coast Organics does this amazing kelp granules that you can add. This is basically seaweed. It's going to give a deep flavor. Adding this to something like a broth with good ginger, like a chicken broth with tons of ginger and the kelp, that's going to add that umami as well. Obviously you've got like your standard sea salts. Remember that obviously if you're using like something like a coarse sea salt, that's good for flavoring pasta waters, whereas a finer salt is better for seasoning something like a salad dressing or something that needs to dissolve. Over here too, I wanted to show you nutritional yeast is another way to add that sort of sodium aspect without necessarily adding salt. Just while we're on it, I mean, when you go to most Michelin star restaurants, they're using this salt, Diamond Kosher Crystal Salt. That's the best kind of straight up seasoning salt because it's not too salty, in which that you can adjust flavor and season foods very accurately with this salt. So it's relatively cheap, like even in this fancier grocery store, it's $6.29. Over here, this just gives me an idea too. Like, never forget that the beans, the liquor that comes with any beans has great rich sodium and usually good starches, so it gives good viscosity to whatever you're cooking. So really, if you take this, Great Northern beans or some of these beans, you saute a little bit of garlic, add that, and add the liquor, that's almost all the sodium you need. You probably won't even need to add that much sodium to the actual dish. So the liquor in beans being a great thing to add. And even if you use the beans and keep the liquor, that's another thing to cook other things in, to add to broths, to add to other soups. So another great way to add salt is using pickles. So a good example of pickles adding good flavor to a sauce would be like tartar sauce. They use very finely chopped pickles, and you're also going to be able to add a little bit of texture. Shout out Backyard Brine, these are great pickles. So diced pickles in any dish or any dip that you're making is great. Obviously something like capers is a traditional way to use salt. You think about something like a pan-fried chicken, pounded out and then cooked in a lemon caper sauce, right? That's adding a ton of salt and the juice with this as well, without actually using table salt. Of course, olives is another good example. You can chop olives, add them to potato sauces. You can roll goat cheese in olives. You can throw olives into almost anything to give that spongy kind of olive texture. I mean, obviously you think of a martini too. Salt is a big part of the taste of martini, so don't overthink olives. But basically anything that comes in brine, you can use the brine or you can use the product in your cooking. You know, don't overthink throwing things like pickles in a grilled cheese. That's going to cut through the acidity with the salt, is going to cut through the cheese really well. Okay, a really typical way in Europe to add salt with actually adding salt is using cured meat. So whether that's a coppa or whether that's a prosciutto, think about something like melon and prosciutto, the combination of kind of this sweet juicy fruit and then the saltiness of meat. This is speck, which is like an Austrian ingredient. For example, like Creminelli makes a great prosciutto, is an American made company. And so this type of product you can use to cut into little slices, and you can actually saute in a pan, much like you would bacon bits, add crispness. You know, you can add that on top of something as simple as a goat cheese salad with arugula, or you can wrap ingredients in it, whether that's scallops or halibut, and that's going to add seasoning to a piece of fish, as well as crispiness, obviously when you crisp it in a pan. But again, that's another way to add salt and texture and deep flavor, that cured meat kind of goodness. Another great way to add texture as well as seasoning is to take basically any nut that you have in your pantry, whether it's cashews, pine nuts, almonds, grind it in a mortal pestle or under a frying pan to a thin paste, and you can use that as seasoning. Basically grind it to what you would coarse salt, and you can dust that over almost anything to season it, because a lot of nuts, especially unless you get the unsalted ones, but most nuts are going to have a ton of salt in them, okay? And then you can basically use them the same way that you would sprinkle salt over things. And finally, any snack food. Obviously, there's endless crispy, crunchy, salty things in your pantry already, and they're called snacks. That's how snacks are made. They're crispy, salty, and crunchy. So you could grind up anything from potato chips to pretzels, right? You can grind up tortilla chips into a bit of a crumble, and you can add that to the top of guacamole, to the top of mac and cheese. You can slip chips obviously into sandwiches is a classic one, but you can generate a bit of crunch and a ton of seasoning and salt, and also built-in seasoning when you think about something like a jalapeno lime tortilla chip here. Like, that has a lot of built-in flavor that you can layer into a salsa or over top of a salsa, or you can layer over top of a 3-bean dip, or you can layer over top of even tossing chicken wings off the grill in it is going to give like an added crunch. Or you think about elote corn, you roll corn and mayonnaise and some cojita cheese and then some crumbled jalapeno lime chips. There's a dish right there, right? That's going to give crunch. So never overlook, your snack drawer. You know, another great simple example, pork rinds, right? These are really popular right now as almost keto breadcrumbs. So that means basically you just grind these down and they can be used as breadcrumbs to make schnitzel or croquettes or whatever you need to add, because there's salt and there's crunch to them. Now obviously bacon is a classic way to add salt and rich flavor to a dish, but people overlook jerky all the time. One of the best things you can do, take biltong, which is South African style jerky, fry it up in a little bit of olive oil with old rice, biltong fried rice. That's an amazing way to add flavor, is taking any jerky and adding it to any dish. I mean, something really simple you can do is make a grilled cheese, add a little jerky in between. That adds like huge meat flavor. And when you cook off jerky in a bunch of olive oil, you basically are flavoring the olive oil you're cooking it in as well. So if you took something like this jerky, right? It's a pepper jerky, and you took a quarter of a cup of olive oil and you cook down the jerky in the olive oil, it's going to release the meat flavor. It's going to flavor your oil, so you're going to end up with crispy jerky that you can dust over, again, mac and cheese, pasta, salads. There's a little bit of crunch that adds salt as well. But you're also going to be left with a beautiful oil that you're going to be able to use in the salad dressing or to roast vegetables in, or whatever you need. So again, with the beauty of using ingredients instead of salt is you can basically choose your flavor. So, you know, do you want to add a little bit of teriyaki salt flavoring, or do you want to add a little bit of pepper salt flavoring? Do you want to go with a, you know, more South African biltong style, which is going to have coriander, which is going to have a bit more spices involved? You know, you can obviously even go the route of maple glazed smoked salmon bites, right? How would you work those in? Maybe you'd add it with a little bit of cream cheese and make a quick sandwich. Dice that up, fold it through cream cheese, and make a quick sandwich out of it, or smear it on a bagel, right? So you can basically take any ingredient that naturally has salt, add it to food, and start there before you go in and add table salt to your next meal. You probably have many of these items sitting in your pantry right now that you've never used in a long, long time. And so just think about it. Think about, how do I put the old olives in the back? How do I put the old pickles on the top shelf? How do I start incorporating this into my cooking? Use that food that's sitting in your pantry right now.